This is Adam Watson.
Robert Diaz.
Levon Baker.
You're listening to the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. So on the last episode that Levon was not on because he wasn't responding to messages at the time. And by the way, Elias deleted him from Facebook because he wasn't responding to messages.
He's been sending me gifts on Pokemon, though. Which is funny because I thought that he deleted Pokemon.
Maybe he's trying to buy your love.
Yeah, he's like, let me see.
He hasn't been sending me gifts on Pokemon.
What the hell?
Anyhow.
I didn't even know you could send gifts.
Oh, you can do a bunch of stuff since you quit playing it.
Oh. Trainer versus trainer battling's coming.
Is it?
Like, the update's supposed to happen, it looks like
actually.
January 31st.
So one of the cool things you can do now is you can just make it to where it counts your steps when you're not actually playing. Then when you log in, you'll have, like, eggs hatch and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So it'll just track you throughout the day?
Uh-huh.
So it's watching you?
Well, it was already watching you.
Oh, yeah. Everything.
I mean, your smartphone's watching you, period, right? That's why it's got, like, 2 cameras on it.
Always watching. And
Always.
listening.
Yeah. And you put a smartwatch on yourself, then you're just being more monitored. But I know that I'm just being monitored so I can have advertisements sent my way, so, you know.
Oh, there you go.
It's like in the Futurama episode where Fry...
With the in the eye, or...
No.
Or in his dreams?
No, not the iPhone.
Yeah.
The Dreams episode.
Yeah, when he
where
when
he's
he gets
all
rich.
upset and he lists all the different places that advertising was in the 20th century, but never in your dreams.
Never.
Not in your dreams.
That's a good episode.
They're all good episodes. I
They
love
are.
that one. Futurama's great. And King of the Hill's now back on Hulu.
I saw that.
Here? Did you see that here?
No, I saw it on my Hulu.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been like binge watching it because, you know, there's actually more episodes than what I realized that I hadn't seen yet.
You know what you should have done was cancel Hulu and make a new account for it was their, I don't know if it was Cyber Monday or Black Friday.
Uh-huh.
They had a deal, 99 cents a month for a year.
Oh.
What the fuck?
It was so popular, it crashed for hours.
You should have contacted me because our Hulu account's in Otter's name. We could have canceled it and done one in my name, and then we didn't even have to worry about it if you, like, doubled it up or whatever.
It was really popular.
That's
Shit.
awesome.
So, anyway, now back to topic. So last podcast that Robert was on, but Levon was being an asshole and he wasn't. We talked a lot about comic pricing. I think I filled you in on most of it since then. I guess that wasn't our last episode. Our last episode we were interviewed. But
Interviewing.
we were interviewing, yes.
You said we.
We did an interview. We conducted
You said
an
we
interview.
were interviewed.
Okay, we conducted an interview on the last podcast, but the one before that we were talking about pricing. At the end of it, I know you don't remember, Robert, but I had mentioned that I was going to be going to some comic shops, and when I did, I was going to check in on some of these books that were having the higher price points, right? So one of the books we talked about while we were on the last podcast was the newest Uncanny X-Men #1, which is like, what, the 6th or 7th Uncanny X-Men #1? Something like that. But in any case, it was the one that is going to be a 10-part weekly series, and the first issue carried the $7.99 cover price.
Yeah.
And Lone Star couldn't seem to agree if it was an 80-page or a 72-page comic. Looked a bit more into it at 72 pages, but I gotta tell you, when I picked it up at the shop and held it in my hands, it didn't feel any thicker than like the 48-page annuals that Marvel used to put out all the time, back when they were printed on newsprint. Which kind of led me to wonder what everybody's talking about with paper quality these days, because if paper quality were actually that good in newer books, shouldn't that have been far thicker and heavier?
You would think.
Than a 48-page book, you know, something that had almost 30 pages less that was published 20 years ago.
Maybe they made it better and smaller.
No, they're using super thin, like, magazine-style paper, you know, like the cheaper magazines have.
That's
So, you know,
tears real easy.
There are magazines that have thick, nice paper, you know, but there's a lot of them that have the super thin, you know, like Ben's, tears, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the type that Marvel's using these days. But anyway, since then, I also found out that the printer that Alterna Comics is using for their newsprint line is right in our backyard.
How close?
Salem.
That's pretty close.
Yeah. So the company that he's been doing his newsprint line from is the company that owns our local newspaper.
Pamplin Media Group?
Eagle Web Press.
Oh. Then I don't know what I'm talking about. I see that name on there.
I think Pamplin is the Oregonian.
Oh. Okay.
I think. So anyway, Eagle Web Press. Well, maybe they don't own them. Maybe they're just who prints it. But in any case, they're the printer for it. I know that because Eagle Web Press trucks are what you see deliver the Malala Pioneer. Every week, they do the Canby Herald as well. But in any case, I was aware of the fact that they printed comics. Because back when Ty did Captain Cure, it was printed on newsprint through Eagle Web Press. But I didn't take it as serious back then because Ty used markers to color his book. And the whole thought and theory for years has been that you can't do digital coloring and actually make it look good on a newsprint book, right? But I've showed you guys the stuff that Alterna does. So what are your thoughts regarding that?
I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I like it.
I agreed from what you've shown me in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, theirs is digital, I take it?
Most colorists these days do digital. But yeah, they've released a few books recently that used more of what I would consider like, there's digital coloring and there's like digital effects coloring, where it's more of the type of stuff that you see in like sci-fi comics, things like that. They've done some things along those lines recently, and I picked up one. I think it turned out really well.
Well, if more people look at it, then maybe they'll think, hey, you can do this, but...
Right.
You think that would start to drive up the price of something like that?
No, I think the more people who are doing it and the more paper stock is being used, the cheaper things get.
True, because it's not as in demand. Or not that it's not as in demand, but it's not a...
Specialty?
Okay.
Yeah.
No. You guys are thinking completely wrong. Newsprint is not a specialty print.
Okay.
So, when you go to the post office and you get your mail from your P.O. box or, in your mailbox if you get it curbside, whatever, and you have the inserts from Safeway, what do you think that's printed on?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Newsprint is probably the most commonly used paper there is.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is if I were going through an offset printer and I wanted to order newsprint from an offset printer, it would probably cost me more money because they don't stock that paper. And so it would be seen as like a specialty order through them.
Well, that's what
But
we're
if I'm
thinking.
going through a
Yeah.
web press, that's a company that already uses and is established using newsprint, and they have reams and reams and reams of it. And so, no, if there was a call for it again with the companies, I'm sure they start using it, but from my understandings, you have to use a web press in order to print newsprint because of the thickness and type of paper it is. So, because newsprint is basically just like a bunch of paper that's been glummed together somehow. And so, you can't stick it through offset or digital machines because it'll glum it up. So you have to actually have like a web press in order to do that. And as for the exacts on why, I couldn't tell you that.
You're not some paper specialist?
I know a lot more about paper than probably most comic creators, but not a specialist in the same way that the people who actually run the printing presses are. No.
Great.
I try to learn as much as I can about their language and, like why this is that and why is that. I have books on paper printing that date back by 50 to 60 years to stuff that was just published in the last couple of years. I haven't read all of it, though.
That sounds pretty boring.
I read a lot of stuff that you would probably consider as very boring.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
It's knowledge that you want, so...
It's knowledge that I want, exactly.
You want boring knowledge.
If it's useful to me. All knowledge is boring to someone.
Whoa, that's so knowledgeable.
Like, I like video games, right? You know that. When Levon and I were at a garage sale earlier this year, we picked up a Sega Saturn. I didn't have any cords to test it with or anything like that. But hey, I picked up a Saturn for like $1, right? yesterday I was in Oregon City, and I finally get a chance to stop by the video game store there and have it tested. I like that video game store. It's a nice little retro game store, right? And I appreciate that they're nice enough to test it for me. But while I was in there, the guy that was running the counter, for no reason at all, started telling me in great detail about this PC game that he had been addicted to. And how even though he had bruised ribs, he still needed it to be played. So the other guy that was working there, he called in over to his house and had him prop him up in his bed so that he could watch him play it on his computer. And it was like, weird. I couldn't get away from him, right? Now, the knowledge that I'm imparting to you by telling you this does you no good any more than it did for him to tell me. That was knowledge I didn't need to have.
That's knowledge I'm going to forget.
That's knowledge I didn't need to hear twice.
It's knowledge that I don't necessarily want in my brain, but
now it's there forever.
Probably.
What game was it?
I don't even know. I couldn't understand what he was saying. It was one of those games that had a name that sounded totally made up, you know?
It's probably the game that he made on his computer, and he's like, but I need someone to play it, so...
You know, with some of the way he was describing it, that might have been. All I know is he kept saying everything was satisfying. He's like, it's so satisfying. And then when the Saturn booted up, he's like, I've never heard one of these boot up before. It's so satisfying.
Was it satisfying?
It was satisfying to hear the sound of money to me.
I was going to say your wallet.
So you guys were in agreement there. The sound of it turning on, that was satisfying.
Right. You got me there.
You guys were satisfied together.
The sound turned on and he turned on.
Yeah. And then they were both satisfied.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm going to make at least a 40 times ROI on that. That satisfies me, yes.
I feel like we've ran away with this a little bit.
Yeah, but that's okay. So, dialing it back. I've been talking to some of my comic creator friends, you know, things of that nature. And I've just been kind of doing sort of market tests on what people think is too high of a price, what people think is too low of a price, where they're going to start questioning quality, right? And the basic consensus on those things that I've got so far are, number one, that some people who work in the comic industry view going back to newsprint is going back to a lower form of work.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like comics were on newsprint forever, and when they started being printed on that thicker, glossier stock, it was somehow seen by them as like an acceptance of their art form.
Could be. It has the look of it. I can see
that a little bit, yeah.
It pops when it's glossy. Newsprint. When I think of newsprint and newspapers and when you think newsprint, you think newspapers. Like the color and stuff on that.
If you actually know it's called newsprint, sure.
Yeah. But it looks a bit. It's darker. It doesn't really
dull.
Yeah, it doesn't pop as much. So maybe that's what they think. They thought I got a bright, shiny product.
Yeah, but the bright, shiny can work against you, too.
It can.
Because if somebody doesn't lay out the colors correctly with the bright and shiny, number one, bright and shiny can make your colors look a totally different color than you meant for them to. So you can run into the same problem that people talk about with newsprint. Number two, have you ever tried reading a bright and shiny book with an overhead light?
Yeah, it's really reflective.
Yeah.
You gotta move it around a little bit.
Yeah, is that an enjoyable reading experience?
No, I hate that.
You know, that was one of the biggest issues that I had after I started hanging out with you, was I'd come home with stacks of books, and you see my lamp.
Yeah.
I don't have a light shade on it because my living room has no overhead lights, so I have to put it on my little nightstand next to the couch. Every one of the books that I was reading, I was having difficulties with because that light is directly on it.
Yeah.
And because they reflect light. Yeah. And tell me, what's a better reading experience?
Something you can actually see and read.
Yeah.
So, would you rather have a slightly darker tinge to the paper, which, by the way, when it's new, it's white.
Right.
The dark tinge you're talking about is something that happens with age. Or would you rather have it be reflective and you can't read in certain rooms?
Yeah.
Well, some things I do like that glossy look to.
I do on some things, but see, like, there's a difference between the glossy look and, like, a creamy look. So when you take a look at like any of the comics that Scholastic puts out, they're really glossy pages and they reflect a shit ton of light, right? Now, on the other hand, when you take a look at like the very high production value Absolute editions that DC puts out, the paper stock is really thick, but it's like creamy and doesn't reflect a bunch of light. So it's like a very premium quality paper.
I haven't seen what those look like.
They're expensive. I actually don't have any Absolutes, otherwise I would show you. I have examples of omnibus editions, hardcovers, just standard hardcovers, trade paperbacks, all that kind of stuff. But I don't own an Absolute book. What they look like is they look like something that's made by a high-end book club, I guess, would be the best way to say that. Each one of them comes in its own slipcase edition. They're about the size of an omnibus, so they're very thick. They're leather bound. The pages are very, very like...
That sounds really fancy.
Thick cream. They're fancy books. They are very fancy books. I don't think there is anything in the comic industry currently that compares quality-wise with the DC Absolute editions.
What's the price tag on one of those?
I think, like, with Sandman, I think there are 3 or 4 of them in total. And I think the price tag on those like $79.99 a piece, I think.
That sounds about accurate.
Yeah, and there might be 4 to 5 of them in total. But I think each one of them has like $79.99. They are loaded with extra features as well, things like that. And they all, if I remember right, they all have their own like silk bookmark. That's an attached bookmark, all that kind of stuff.
It sounds like the cream of the crop for
They are
comics.
the cream of the crop, and because of that, the Absolute editions are for things like Watchmen, Why the Last Man, Preacher, like the books that are actually deserving of having this kind of treatment.
That's how the fancy people read their standard issues.
Yes. Maybe. I don't know. I really want some of the Absolute editions. Thing is, you can find them on sale all the time for like $50 or less.
But you're still trying to bring yourself to spend $50.
No, I'm trying to find $50 to spend.
Well, there's that too. I guess size-wise, you might be able to make yourself pay that for that. You're getting that quality for however big of a book that is.
Yes. Yeah. I've got no problem spending something like that because, I've spent that kind of money on omnibus editions before, things like that. It basically came down to what did I want worse. The last time I bought an omnibus, In Stock Trades was selling the Doctor Strange omnibus editions for like $29, which they're normally cover price like $109.99.
Holy shit.
So I was like, $29. That's what I'm spending it on.
So these omnibus and these ultimate editions, is that what you call
Absolute.
them? Absolute editions. Mm-hmm. They come with this price tag because they're really high quality and there's a lot to them. Correct? Like they pack a lot of story into it?
Yeah. The omnibus editions standardly have more in them than the Absolute editions do. The Absolutes are as thick as they are, not just because of how much story they have in them, but also because of the special features and the thickness of the paper, things like that. The omnibus editions, I don't think I've read one yet that actually had like special features type things. But honestly, even as a comic creator, I very rarely ever read the special feature sections in the comics, When I finished the comic, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm done with that one for a while, And it's weird because I'll go back and read interviews, 3-4 months later or whatever, that were about it. But if they're in the back of the book, I'm not going to read it when I finish it. Because I finished it, and I just want to put it down for now. You know what I mean at all? Does that make sense?
I can say that I do that occasionally.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'll take a break. I'll finish the book, and then I'll take a break for a day or two. And I might come back and read the special feature section, or skim it through.
About how many comics do you read in a month?
Not very many anymore.
Okay.
But, even when I buy... I have a couple of the Turtle books that are the big Ultimate editions like that. And I'll finish the book, and then take a break, and I might come back and read it.
Yeah, those are higher quality, too.
Right, yeah.
And then
I like
you have,
the quality
like,
the paper has
Are
those.
they called the artist editions that IDW releases? Yeah. That are the actual, 11 by 17 books that represent the artwork as it first appeared, and then they just have the lettering right on top of the artwork.
Yeah,
But
I've
no
got a couple of
coloring,
those.
no touch-up, no anything like that.
I don't know any of those. I've never looked at them, so I don't know all these special features.
They're
the,
huge.
The IDW ones
They're
are kind
fucking
of cool
huge.
Yeah, so I have the artisan edition of the first Ninja Turtles book,
Uh-huh.
and it's got the original pencils, so like with no text, no words over it, period.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's just literally just the sketches with word bubbles drawn in.
Uh-huh.
The next section is like inked but not cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next section is the entire book inked and how they would do the two hue colors and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the very last section is the final toned, nice original version of it. So it's like 6 versions of the book in one.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually enjoy that. Like, I mean, I don't sit there and read through it all because, yeah, I'm just going to skim and look and be like, oh, that's a really nice
I
piece.
don't really think stuff like that is for reading as much as it is
Right.
studying.
Yeah. And, I mean, to me, that's cool because I'm
Right.
an artist and that's what I want to know more
Yeah.
about.
And you would probably arguably want that anyway because you're a giant Ninja Turtles
Right.
fan.
What if, obviously there's the quality that is one of the things that demands the price of an omnibus edition. What if your omnibus edition was printed on newsprint? Would you still want to buy that?
That really depends. When I'm buying something like that, I do expect something of a higher quality.
Well, that obviously it would. The price would track up the same,
Mm-hmm.
but it would not be at the same price level because who's going to pay
Okay.
that? No one would pay the same price.
In response to that, I would probably point out Bone 1 volume edition. The Bone 1 volume edition is not newsprint. I can't tell you what type of paper it is exactly. But what I can tell you is that the paper is thin enough that if you hold one of the pages up to the light, you can see both sides of the printing. Which means the paper's pretty thin.
Mm-hmm.
That never obscured my pleasure in reading it. It never made me think, oh boy, I overspent on this or did I? I mean, like the Bone 1 volume edition, I bought the very first printing. I think it was like $30 for the whole complete series, right? And then Dylan Dog had an compendium edition in America released that was very similar by Dark Horse.
It's not much bigger than size wise, it's not much bigger than an actual book, but it's thicker.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
one
yeah.
that's like that big.
Yeah, that's compendium edition.
Yeah, I got that. It was Alex's.
Okay.
I have.
So I think the cover price on that one was something similar to like $30.
Yeah, it wasn't
And-
too expensive.
See, like, I've got no problem buying one of those editions that are like that, but I do have one thing that you never did have, which is that I was a collector of these things for years prior to becoming a creator. So the collector in me wants the most premium representation of it, Like, if trade paperbacks are what exist and I love this story, then trade paperbacks are what I want, ultimately. But if they release a hardcover, then I probably want the hardcover. If they release an omnibus that represents like 4 of the hardcovers, then guess what I want, And so it would be kind of it would just depend on the way I looked at it because like I really, really, really wanted the entire Max series when IDW started representing it. And originally they had all the Max issues in single issue format. Which, don't get me wrong, if I had been able to track those down at Comic-Cons, I would have been more than happy to read it that way. But they were impossible to hunt down at Comic-Cons. Like, the first couple of issues you find everywhere. The last dozen or so, you find, like, nowhere of those issues. They did a trade paperback series, and at the time I wasn't able to afford to pick them up, and then they went way up in the aftermarket, right? So IDW started redoing this series with different coloring, and then started releasing hardcover editions of 4-issue runs out of it, and they started releasing them like every 4 or 5 months, 6 months, something like that, right? And so I started picking up the hardcovers, and I had the first 2 volumes. And then they announced they were doing an omnibus edition, right? So I'm like, oh shit, did I just buy those 2 hardcovers and now I'm going to have to sell them and buy something else? But when I saw it, it turned out the omnibus for it was a soft cover, and the presentation for it was a bit closer to like the Dylan Dog or the Bone omnibus, right? No, I'd rather just keep collecting the hardcovers. Even though it would have been cheaper and easier to just buy the whole thing all at once in that softcover format, And then I could read it as one continuous book rather than, put it down and go grab the other hardcovers if I was reading all in one night, which I probably wouldn't have time to. But I wanted the hardcovers because that's better quality. That's what looks, better on my shelf, honestly,
Are newsprint comics in general cheaper than other comics?
Yes. Yeah.
Because of what it's made out of? Is that part of it?
Oh, yes.
So what if... Would you be more inclined to pick up this new Marvel book if they cut the price in half and printed it on newsprint?
Which book?
The Uncanny X-Men, this expensive book.
I liked the cover well enough that, I would have. They put characters on it that were appealing to me because I was a huge X-Men collector in the 90s. I stopped around the time the first movie came out because I didn't like where the stories were going. I didn't like where they were taking the characters. But if they produced something that looked appealing to me, I would most definitely give it a shot. I bought a hardcover of Wolverine and the X-Men when we were at Sasquatch 2 shows ago because a guy sold it to me for $2. So if they put a cheap enough price tag on it, I would try it because I'm willing to try X-Men stories still to this day if the price of entry is good. And I'm not saying, you have to spend as little as $2 on a hardcover, but I asked the guy, hey, how much is this? $2. Well, duh. Like, I'm not going to spend $2 on a hardcover,
So you said this Uncanny was $7.99?
Correct.
So $8. So
Correct.
if they just print it on newsprint right next to it, and you see that it's $4 instead for that quality, of which you would normally still pay less money than $4, you'd still be inclined to buy it.
No.
Because that's really what I'm asking.
Because it was a 10-part weekly series. The only way I would have picked up the first issue for a cheaper price is if A, it wasn't a 10-part weekly series, or B, it was at such a low price that I could buy it and know that Marvel was going to release a trade of it and see if I want to buy the trade. There is a certain amount of reality to the comic industry has trained people to trade weight. And anything Marvel or DC comes out with these days is getting a trade released. That being said, if it was coming out in newsprint and it was cheap enough, I would buy it in comic format, but only if it was coming out on a monthly basis.
So
I am not going to go to the comic shop 10 times in the next 10 weeks. I already know that.
Yeah, but you're still willing to pay the $4 for a monthly book of that size that's printed
72
on newsprint.
issues? Or 72 pages?
Yeah.
Would I spend $4 on a 72-page book?
Yeah.
It depends on how much I want to read it.
Well, I think you can ask that question about most things, but
yes,
is that a fair
you're stating,
price
is
for
it
that?
Something that I would want?
I'm just asking
I would
if more
consider
people started to use
72
that
pages at $4 to be a good price. Yes,
on that sort of print.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're talking about. So that's why I'm
yes,
wondering. Is
yes,
that pricing
yes.
what you're okay with for newsprint?
I would be okay with that.
Like, is there too high of a price for newsprint? Would $5 be too much?
How thick of a book?
It's the same book.
Same exact thing, and it was $5. No, because I don't want to spend $5 on any single issue. The only things I'm going to spend $5 on are going to be like the magazines that Tomorrow's Press comes out with that are like interviews with comic creators and things like that.
So it goes
if
back.
I'm going to spend over $4 on anything, it's going to be a trade or a hardcover.
So it goes
I would
back
rather
to that
spend
thing from the
$15 than $5.
It goes back to that thing from the beginning about $4. Like I was saying, $4 kind of feels like the change in your pocket. $5 feels like something.
Yeah. You said that during the last show that we were talking about price. Yeah, I guess there is something to that.
I never really thought about it, but I think that's kind of the way that I see it.
Yeah.
But there definitely is too high of a price with what I want to pay. So let me just go ahead and finish up with what I heard back from other creators. And then we'll kind of flip this question on you guys, and you guys can each answer, okay? So the thing that I was hearing, about these creators not wanting to create for newsprint, it's important to note these guys were all very active when Marvel really sold the fact that their editions had newsprint editions and deluxe editions now, and that the deluxe editions were for the true comic fans, right? Because, like, that's how it felt in the 90s. They had these editions that were $1.50 that were the newsprint that you could go and you could find on the newsstands, like Fred Meyer, Safeway, you know, place like that. And then if you went to the comic shop, you could get the $1.99 edition that had the glossy paper. And back then, the glossy paper they were printing on was non-reflective. And it was actually a pretty nice paper. I really liked the glossy paper they were using back then. I wish I knew what it was, because I found it to be a far better paper than what they're printing on currently. They really advertised that fact, and, like, you know, there were stories in Wizard about it, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of the reason that these guys who were super, super active, you know, 94 to 98, and that's when they were the biggest career-wise, why they don't want to go back to newsprint is because they were kind of told, hey, this is a lateral jump in the quality of the direction of, you know, the books. It's kind of a difference in people taking them serious with their work, I think. I think that they somehow kind of have what paper it's printed on tied into their self-esteem and self-worth as creators.
That kind of makes sense.
It's my own theory. I mean, I'm not basing that off of anything you know, no one has actually said those exact words that I'm saying. It's just my own theory, right? The other thing I've kind of learned from my discussions with people is that the majority of people who seem to read comics don't actually seem to know anything about paper and don't really care which paper is printed on. They don't seem to notice. So the third thing is, while everyone has given me a very, very hard, or while it has been very, very hard to get a price out of people of what they view to be too low of a price, the basic consensus that I'm getting from everybody is that things are too high priced. What they want those prices to be, they don't seem to know. But they do view a major problem in the industry of getting people to jump on, of trying to show other people, you know, this hobby, get people introduced, so on and so forth, is that it has a very, very high cost to get into.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
So I think that problem's actually kind of multifaceted, because number one, it is a problem where cover prices of these issues are so much, right?
Right.
But number two, I think it's also a problem with the characters they're trying to introduce them to. So if I told you about this really, really, really kick-ass character named Wolverine, and you want to get into him, and I'm trying to get you to get into him, and you're looking at it, and you're looking at the cost of entry, do you look at it as a cost of entry of going and picking up a $3.99 or $4.99 or even $5.99 comic this month? Or is the cost of entry you going and picking that up and the hardcover collection, or softcover even, of the Chris Claremont Frank Miller Wolverine series? In the collection that has his first appearance Incredible Hulk, in the collection that, you know, tells his adventures in Madripoor when he was Patch, and, you know, all this stuff. Like, you know, by cost of entry, do they mean the cost of entry is too steep for just this monthly title, or is it the cost of entry of introducing anybody to a superhero in comics these days? Because they've saturated them to the point where, you know, you can't even just go back and find all of the issues of their normal comic if you want to understand them. You got to figure out all the fucking places they've crossed over and shit too, you know?
There's a lot
and
of
if
shit
that's
like
a
that.
problem, I don't have to worry about that as much with my comics, because obviously that barrier is going to be a lot lower for my comics. And if I keep my publishing mottos and lines pretty straight, that's never really going to be an issue, because the reading order in Darkslinger issues, when you pick them up in trade paperback form, should be the same as the single issues, which is that Volume 1 is Volume 1, Volume 2 is Volume 2, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So hopefully that won't be something I really have to overcome. I understand it with Marvel because they've kept these characters in constant production for how long? You know, I mean, like Captain America, those guys, they first appeared in the 30s. Obviously, you don't need to know every single bit of all that info, but if you really, really get involved in the character, that is a high cost of totally knowing the character, right? There's a very high cost of entry when it comes to most superhero characters that don't exist if I introduce you guys to somebody else. Like, if I introduce you guys to Why the Last Man, you know, that's like, what, I think 9 volumes? In trade paperback form, 3 absolutes. I think it was like 5 deluxe hardcovers. So, you know, whatever way you guys want to pick it up. You're looking at like a couple $100 at tops to enjoy the whole entire series, you know?
Right.
I don't care for. I like crossovers. They're fun, but I hate how much crossover there is. Like, I don't want to have to. I don't want to really like one character and then have to go and find all these other books where it crosses over for this one damn storyline.
Yes.
I want to buy this storyline, however many issues that is. And if it's cool and it crosses over into another cool character and I got to buy that, that's all well and good. If it crosses over for like one issue, one
You're
trade.
talking about the difference between crossovers and events.
Could be, yeah. I don't know that much.
With the crossover, you're not talking about like if DC and Marvel got together and they're like Batman and Spider-Man need to team up.
That sounds like a stupid team up.
They've done it. And they had
Batman would probably like punch Spider-Man in the face.
I don't think they were ever enemies.
No, but it seems like he would get really annoyed with
I've never
Spider-Man.
read it though. I've just listened to the Comic Pop channel talking about it. But anyway, like Spider-Man and Batman, they teamed up and they did like these little prestige format comics that are like 48 pages or something like that, right? And I think they did like 2 issues. They did the same thing with Punisher and Batman, stuff like that. That was crossing over, right? You can do that on a normal just company level too. Spoiler alert. But there is a character from Chronicles of Von Helsing that appears on one page of Ghost Assassin. So, do you need to go pick that up if you're a Chronicles of Von Helsing fan? Nope. It doesn't actually affect either one of their stories. He's just a background character in this one page of one Ghost Assassin issue, right? It's kind of a cool little, hey, they're all in the same universe somehow sort of little thing, right?
Right.
But, like if Wolverine goes and appears in Spider-Man's title this one month and Spider-Man appears in Wolverine, it's like a 2-part story. That's just a crossover, right? But then you have, like, Marvel Civil War or Secret Wars or Secret Invasion or House of M or Jesus, how many titles how many crossovers have they done? DC as well. Where it's like you have the main event book that's like 8 issues and then you have the 400 tie-ins because like the Wolverine series has like 4 issues that tie into it. The Spider-Man series have 4 issues that tie into it.
Yeah, I don't
Is
like
that what you mean?
That's
because
what I
that's
mean.
like a big crossover event.
Okay, I don't
And
like that
the
sort of
big
stuff.
companies do events way too much.
I like
too much.
one long strand of story,
Uh-huh.
and that's about it.
Events used to be special and cool in comics, Like back when I was a kid in the 90s, they were advertising that they were canceling all the X-Men books, right? And nobody could believe that because X-Men was the most popular comic series at the time, right? Well, they did kill them all off, or they did cancel them all, kinda, for 4 months. But it was to replace them with the Age of Apocalypse crossover event, right? I very, very rarely ever hear somebody say anything bad about Age of Apocalypse. The most of the time, the only thing I really hear is like people who are your guys' age be like, wow, those comics are really of their time. You didn't read them when they were new,
Right.
understandable, dated.
Right. Yeah. But honestly, they dated pretty well, I think, all in all. But in any case, you have like an event that was really cool. That was like, this big summer thing that was 4 months. You didn't have to read every single issue in that series if you wanted to understand just the main arc. But if you read every single one of them in it, you got like this big complex world they were doing, right? So it's really cool. That being said, they didn't need to start doing it every single summer.
They do it with their TV shows and movies too.
Yes.
Which is kind of annoying. Because maybe someone can't go watch all these movies. Maybe people can't watch all these shows.
Maybe you're just not interested in it.
It could be that too. But what if you need part of the story in one of these other ones?
Right?
Right.
That's
understandable,
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an issue with that a lot.
Uh-huh.
If I like something, I don't want to have to go see something that I don't like just to understand 20 minutes of the next movie.
Yes.
Or the next book.
Yeah, and I feel like you guys are really talking about the Avengers with that.
Well, I mean, anything like that.
Yeah,
like, when I was
DC's TV shows do it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big, but I
That's just yet another thing I absolutely loved about the Punisher. Is, you might have got more out of it had you watched Daredevil and seen him in that first. but everything you need to know about the character was in his own series. None of the other superheroes showed up in his series. So, like, he appeared in Daredevil series. So if you really, really care what his relationship is with Karen Page, you go back and watch Daredevil season 2. But I didn't feel like you would need to in order to just get that it was,
There's no weird tie-ins with, like, episode 8, he goes here.
Nope.
Episode 9, he comes back and
Nope.
is like...
Everything you need to know about the character was
you
presented
didn't even
to
know,
you
but I was in this
in
one episode over
the storyline.
Yeah, I watched The Flash. I didn't watch all of it, but there were parts by the time it got so far into the show, they had like 3 or 4 different shows going that could tie in together, and you'd get to the end of one and be like, see the next part on this other show, and I'm like, nope.
Oh, it's when they did the big Supergirl crossover.
There was Supergirl. There was their Legends
Green
of
Arrow.
Tomorrow.
Right?
Yeah, Arrow.
Yeah, Arrow.
Part of it. I forgot. Oh yeah, the whole Marvel TV shows though on Netflix. I like those. Those didn't seem to really interrupt each other
Right.
too much, and so they canceled all those because they're making their own thing.
That I know of, they only canceled 3 thus far.
I thought that I heard that they were canceling them because Marvel's making their own, like Disney's doing their own streaming.
Well, Disney's
platform.
been rumored to be doing their own streaming platform for a long time.
But they were reaching out to try to
they've
pull back
announced
in
that
their.
they're actually doing
They're pulling
Oh, they
back
are?
all their licensing to release their own.
Yeah,
Well-
they pulled like literally all their Disney shows off Netflix so that they can put them on their own streaming service.
All Foxes are going to be pulled too, right? Because they own Fox now.
That's a good question.
Yeah, did that? Yeah, I don't know. That is a good question.
So anyway, let's get back to, more of the topic of the comics, so and less the TV shows and movies. So all the questions you asked me, I'm going to reverse those on you guys now.
All right, ask it.
Okay. So, when we're talking about the quality and you're talking about, what I pay $4 for 72 pages.
Would I pay, like, just the normal sort of shit that you'd get?
Like, yeah, like if it was something you were
stock?
actually interested in. Newsprint.
Newsprint.
Stock. Yeah.
If it catches my attention and it's $4, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
72 pages, that seems like a lot to get for $4.
Here's a different question I have for you guys, okay? We've all bought single issue comics. Now, granted, Robert's been a little bit more spoiled because you and I grew up, picking up single issue comics at full cover price.
Right.
He, on the other hand, got more introduced to single issues going to Frankenstein with me and being like, ooh, 10-cent bins.
I've never bought a single issue that cost over 50 cents.
Yeah, you've never actually paid full cover price for one.
Yes.
But here's the most important question for me to be asking as a publisher, I think. Have you guys ever stopped when picking up a single issue? And I'm not talking about a trade paperback. I'm not talking about a hardcover, anything like that. Just single issues. Have you guys ever stopped and said, what type of paper stock does this thing have? And open it up and start filling the paper and looking at it to tell what type of paper stock it has?
No, I wouldn't say that question is asked.
Okay.
But, you open it and you look at the quality of it. We don't know what we're looking at, but
right.
We'll still judge it by what it feels like and if it looks good.
Yeah, I would say like more what Robert's saying.
Okay.
There has been times where I've picked books up,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't like that they were glossy, so I did put them back.
Okay.
Just because I was like, I don't want to read that. Just like there's actually a number of older books that I picked up and didn't like the way that they looked on newsprint.
Okay.
And put them back. I'm really weird like that. There's certain things that I do like on glossy, and there's certain things that I don't.
Okay.
And thinking about that as a creator, I feel like it would be the same way.
Out of curiosity, what did you put back that was newsprint? Because I noticed the vast majority of the things that you...
Well, this is also when I was a kid.
Okay, but...
as an adult,
I'm
going to
stick with the kid part.
Yeah.
Because I'll state, you picked up things that wouldn't just have been newsprint, but a lot of things you collected were actually low-grade newsprint.
Right. As a kid, I collected a lot of Spider-Man books.
Okay.
So there were times where I would
so that's
pick up,
a higher grade newsprint.
Yeah. So there were times where I would pick up older Spider-Man books as a kid and not like the way that it felt or looked.
Okay.
ended up putting them back.
By older, though, do you mean kind of like before that time era of how storytelling was told in the way that made sense to you?
I don't know. A lot of the books that we got, as far as Marvel, were what you would consider vintage now.
Okay.
Like 70s and 80s.
Okay.
They came from my mom's friend, and there was times where we would go through them. She'd let us dig through her long boxes and actually open them up and look at the books and stuff, pick whatever we wanted. And there were times where I'd pick up certain Spider-Man books and be like, I just don't like that. It doesn't look cool. It looks weird. The colors are very mute. Like, I might not know that's what I'm saying, but in my head, that's how your brain processes it. And it's like, that doesn't look appealing. I'm just going to set that one aside and grab this Spider-Man book that same era, but the colors are more popping and it's prettier looking.
Which might have just been a problem with the coloration in general.
Someone like you, or someone like anyone that knows their shit about whatever they're looking at, they're looking at it, they're thinking about it based on knowledge.
Right.
Whereas people that don't know whatever they just picked up or what they're looking at, they're going on instinct. Do I like the way this feels? Do I like the way this looks? Does it handle well? You know, what does this feel like to me? So I feel like maybe not everybody's doing that. They're just looking at maybe a title. They're looking at a picture. They're looking at some color. They're not necessarily looking at the quality. They're looking at these little other aspects that they like.
Yeah. I can definitely say that about modern stuff.
Okay.
So like if I pick up a book that just doesn't feel that great, you know, I'm not. I'll put it back, but the first thing I'm always looking at is the cover or the title rather.
Right.
Because if something sounds a little too stupid to me, you know, I'm not even going to waste my time picking it up.
Yeah, I fully comprehend that. Like, even when people try to loan me stuff, like, Alex kept trying to load me Bitch Planet, right? I hate that title. Yeah, there's nothing about that title that I like.
That does not sound
appealing. That comic could be the greatest comic of all time. I don't know. I hate the logo, and I hate the title. And so, in the two together, I really hate. Because if I don't like your logo, and I don't like what the logo says, then I'm definitely not going to pick it up, right? So, I mean, who knows? I could be missing out on something fantastic there. And it did take me a while to get into some of them that he kept pushing on me that I was like, you know. And a lot of them were the newer Image books. But a lot of them, when I finally read them, I was like, oh, this actually was really good. You know, and a few weren't. But that's just one that no matter how many times he offers it to me, I'm like, no.
That's
I hate that title.
It seems like paper quality can be like at the very closest number 3 of things that someone's going to check out.
Right.
Without probably not noticing that they're checking it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I think that is something that, like, it has to be a very distinct reason for it to be, like, on the number 1 on my list.
Yeah.
Something that I would compare it with is something that's all black and white, like a Garfield book or something like that. It just looks better on newsprint or a non-glossy paper because it's black and white.
Well, that's also because your brain instinctively thinks things like Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield should be on newsprint because that was the earliest delivery method you saw those on.
To an extent, but at the same time, my issue with it is that white is very reflective.
Yes.
If it's glossy and it's black and white, I'm going to have a harder time concentrating on it.
And obviously the black and white
straight
comic strips were created to be on newsprint.
Right.
So, you know, there's something to be said for artists creating to what, you know, something's going to be printed on.
Yeah, so if I picked up a modern book and it's black and white and it's on glossy, I might have to be really, really into whatever it is to actually pick it up and keep it and read it, because if I pick it up and it's black and white glossy and I just open it up and it's immediately like the comic shop's light is reflecting off of it, it's like, that's a fucking headache. Like, I'm going to shove that back on the shelf, grab something else.
I think for me, paper quality, if I had to give it a spot, it would have to be, it couldn't get any higher than number 4 probably without me thinking. Probably push to like maybe even number 5.
Okay.
Because I'm going to think like title, cover, what all that looks like, and then I'm going to flip it open and I'm going to look at the artwork, because there's plenty of there's art styles that just don't really do it for me, like that sort of, I don't know what you call it. I might be calling it something wrong, but it's kind of like a watercolor sort of look where the characters aren't fully drawn in. Kind of lines, and then the colors are a little splattered.
Yeah.
I don't care for that.
There are some artists that do that incredibly well.
Some things look really good like that, but it can be a big turn-off.
What's the name? J.M. DeMatteis, I think. I think that's one of them, who the artwork looks just exceptionally beautiful, and that's the type of stuff it is. But I do know what you mean. There's like 5 artists who do that really, really well, and then there's like 100 of them that's like you need to learn a different art style.
It looks messy.
Yeah, I can get that.
And then after that sort of thing,
and I don't actually know that specific style has a name.
It's got to have a name.
Maybe. I mean, it's more just like inspired by, you know. I mean, like you see like Mike Mignola's stuff, you know, the guy who created Hellboy, and you're like, oh my god, you know, that's so amazing. Then you see like, you know, these 12 up and coming comic creators who you're like, oh wow, you're imitating Mike's style, and that's all you're doing.
Well, it's not
like,
necessarily...
you don't have a style of your own yet.
It's not necessarily a bad thing to imitate other people and
a lot of the time, imitation is what leads you to your own style.
Yeah.
So no, it definitely is not. I mean, everybody starts out emulating someone to some degree, and it's not always imitation so much as it's emulation.
I remember one of the episodes of Fat Man on Batman that had Neil Adams on. He did this whole thing about fuck you for thinking that people that trace when they start out are shit, and that you can't do that.
And I understood his argument. I just didn't think he made it very well.
No, he's a bit abrasive.
Neil Adams is a blowhard.
Yeah, that too.
He is. I mean, like, you know, I met him really, really briefly at the like Comic-Con, you know, nothing more than just a, hey, what's up, you know, and I mean, like, he smiled, he was polite, he was nice, you know, and like, I watched interviews with him and listened to that same Fat Man on Batman one, he's funny. But the dude's also highly, highly full of himself.
Oh, yes.
And you know, I get what he's saying, but
I just like the way that he defended that, you know, someone's just trying to start.
Well, yes, but there is a big difference between tracing something to learn anatomy and tracing something that you sell professionally.
Oh, yeah.
And see, like, I'm not sure that Nil actually took the time to fully listen to that question. Because a lot of times he just starts answering before he's even aware of what the full question is. If you watch interviews with him,
and he talks a lot.
He does, and you know, like I saw this thing where somebody was like, you know, Dave Sim said this. Would you agree with this or da-da? And in the interview, he's all like, I don't remember ever saying that. Da-da, and he just starts like totally responding. The guy's just kind of like, okay. It's like he clearly said Dave Sim said, but you know, whatever. You answer the question, that's fine. You know, in interviews I've read of his, in interviews I've listened to with his, he doesn't seem like he's the type of person that really stops to hear the full formulation for something. And there's a huge difference between someone who's just starting out who traces something to learn from it, and someone who directly traces something, changes elements in it, and then passes it off as original artwork.
Oh yeah, that's bullshit. I can agree with that. Lucas actually made a good point about that the other day. He's been drawing a crap load lately. And he came in, he was like, I just want to say thank you for you and Lauren telling me to trace when I was little. It's like, okay, that's kind of a weird statement.
Right.
It's like, why is that? His logic is that it's taught him how to properly shade and how to pick up where things go. I can agree with that. As a kid, I traced a lot until I knew how to do things properly and got it the right style. It's a completely different thing if I was to trace a picture and just change like this or that and then be like, hey dude, let's post this as a pinup. Like, no, that's bullshit. But I think if you're learning, tracing's not a bad thing to start with.
I mean, I of course can't speak for Kevin Smith, but I think where he was actually going with that question,
I don't even remember the question,
there was a lot of controversy at the time that interview was done about a Marvel artist named Greg Land, who kept like straight up tracing things out of Playboy and Hustler and things like that, and then just coloring it so that the porn star looked like a clothed Black Widow or Invisible Woman or something like that. Like, there's seriously one where Invisible Woman is being slammed into a wall in one of the comics, and you can look at it and you know that's like a screen capture of a porn star it's been traced over and had the Invisible Woman elements thrown on, right? And so I know that, like, during that time, that was a really hotly debated thing. Although I don't really recall anybody really standing up for Greg Land, or is it Greg Land? I might be getting no, it is Greg Land. It's Greg Land. But beyond and besides, maybe a few of the uppers at Marvel who are like, oh no, we like his artwork. We don't care if you like it or not. No, he doesn't trace. What are you talking about? But
well, I know.
But
I don't care for that, but I'd still buy a book that looks like someone else's.
I'm not sure that Neil Adams was aware that that's what was being asked.
Maybe not.
Because it was just kind of like, oh, you know, I gotta respond to this, oh, you know. And, like, he's kind of balls to the wall about everything all the time. And it doesn't always serve you well. Once in a while, it helps to stop, slow down, think, and then act. I mean, like, you know, not to sound too much like a heinous dick here, but where the fuck is Continuity Comics?
You heinous dick.
I know. You guys even know what Continuity Comics is?
Nope.
So the 90s, when everybody was opening up their own comic publishing company, like anybody who's ever been anything in comics opening up one, you know. Neil Adams opened up Continuity Comics, which published, in my opinion, just one good thing ever, Bucky O'Hare. Beyond and besides that, it was like Valerie the She-Devil, Megaton.
That sounds
like,
really awful.
Oh, dude, you should look at them. Their big selling point for all, and Crazy Man, I think there's one called like Crazy Man. The big selling point for a bunch of these issues were that the covers had the ultimate gimmick. They were printed on Teflon and supposedly would never be rippable, right? Well, I've got some of those 50-cent bins over there. If you'd like to test out if they're rippable or not, have at it. So, but the whole thing is like, you know, yeah, the whole thing about Tracy, I'm not even sure how we got there.
Well, we don't really need to know how we got there, but that whole conversation that we just had, delving into art and then style and then tracing,
right?
I think that's answer enough that paper stock isn't what people are looking at really as much.
He's looking at continuity.
We just spent however long rambling on about that.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have this kind of conversation as much with people that don't really know much about the quality of paper.
Yeah.
Look at that terrible shit.
Wow, that looks really bad.
Yeah.
I told you guys.
It's really bad. It's funny.
That's the kind of shit I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dear Lord. I really like this one, though. Why did I do that? Where it's like a weird angle of her looking down.
What the hell is she doing?
Jumping or clawing or something, but
Is that supposed to be she's going?
Yeah, like she can barely see
like
out of her.
You can't really tell what I'm doing, but I'm looking up.
That one is done by Windjammer. I don't know who Windjammer is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different...
a couple different companies that publish it?
Yeah, there's Windjammer and then Continuity.
I knew Continuity
it looks like
did, at least.
Windjammer, that one's issue 1, so maybe it was like 2 different series.
Who the hell knows? 90s comics, you know, like some of them are really great and some of them are just a complete mess. So
would I be willing to pay $4 for a news print?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're about out of time, so go ahead.
But that depends on the quality of everything else that comes before.
And we were talking about $4 for a 72-page issue.
Yes.
So yeah.
What's the other standard? 32?
32 pages.
So 32, $4, that's a hard thing to spend even if it's on a more expensive paper.
Okay.
I'd still would consider not buying it.
Okay. And what about you, Levon?
Yeah, I think it just depends on how bad I really want to complete something.
Okay.
If I'm just trying something out that's new, something I've never purchased before, if it's 32 pages and it's a nicer quality paper, but it's $4.99 and it looks intriguing, I'll probably pick it up.
Okay.
Or I'll wait and pick it up when I have the extra spending money and I'm not so concerned about making sure that I have the money to get what I really want.
Right.
If it
but
doesn't
this
look
is
appealing,
also
then...
the inherent difference between someone who actively seeks comics,
right,
and someone who casually picks them up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's good to have both of your input, you know. And I don't know, we've talked about this topic a lot, but I almost feel like we're not done with it quite yet.
It seems like a conversation that can go on for a long time.
It does. It does. Maybe I need to start getting interviews with more and more...
casuals.
Well, no, not just that, but store owners.
Well, I mean,
Other
obviously,
comic creators, you know, things like that, and then we can kind of discuss the interviews as we go along, as we get them. So
I feel like you're gonna find a lot of the same things. You know, someone that's more of a collector like Levon is gonna be willing to spend more money than someone like me who owns some comics, but doesn't always want to shell out the money when I can think I can wait to get it.
And see, you know, one of the differences between most people like Levon and most people like you is he knows what he's going to buy when he goes to a comic store or when he goes someplace that comics are sold. You don't.
Yeah.
That is
now,
a really
granted,
good point,
Levon is a little bit different. He will pick up something that's new, you know. But if it's between the new issue of Ninja Turtles that he knows isn't even that great, you know, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, you know, if it wasn't. Because he's at the comic shop, and this is the month it comes out, or this week it comes out. And he sees this Ninja Turtle issue there, and, you know, the interior might be kind of so-so, but that cover is really cool, and it features his favorite turtle, or, you know, something that an independent publisher who he's heard, like, one thing about from you, you know, comes out. He's not going to hesitate to buy the Ninja Turtle issue over the other issue. You going to the comic shop as a casual are probably going to be more likely to be like, hey, what's this thing I've never heard of before?
Yeah. Or, like, maybe I'll look at the next in a series of something that I already have.
Yes.
Like, it's...
But I'm talking about, you know, like, something that's, you know, brand new.
Oh, brand new, yeah.
Yeah,
See,
that is a really good point, because I don't go into shops and just browse for whatever. It's generally when I'm looking for something in particular.
Right, and a lot of times you're looking for the newest issue of, like, the newest Ninja Turtle series or something like that. Right, and I'll completely
pass on even looking at anything else if that one book isn't there.
Right.
See, I'm the opposite. I don't go in thinking
that is
about anything.
The difference between, you know, like the hardcore, been collecting this shit for years type of person, and your, you know, casual reader. And, like, I used to be the type that if I went to a comic shop, I was looking for a specific thing, you know, that was what I wanted, da-da-da-da. And then one day at a Comic-Con, I picked something up on a whim, and I've been doing that ever since. Yeah. So,
you know, I know we're running a little long here, but I feel like this kind of goes into it.
Okay.
I think it was the beginning of this week. Had a conversation. It was the beginning of this week, or I don't know, sometime this week.
Okay.
I had a conversation with a friend, and she reads some comics, but she didn't want to. She wants to finish the Saga series.
Okay.
But she doesn't want to buy them because a lot of them are expensive. She wants, like, she might buy some, but if she can't find them at the library for a while, but she'd rather go to the library. And I was like, well, there are these little comic swap things that happen throughout the year you should think about going to. You're not going to find exactly what you want, but you can try out new things, and a lot of the prices are way cheaper than what you get. But she's more willing to shell out at a store, I think, probably, than I am, because I know of these things. Mm-hmm. So I'm less likely to buy something from a store when I can go buy something that's cheap, that's random, because I'm already looking for something random.
That is a really good point.
So I'm a bit more spoiled in that respect. So maybe that's why I'm even more hesitant than a normal person to buy something.
Well, that makes sense. I think that's kind of how it was clear up until we started doing shows, at least for me. I didn't go in and just pick up whatever random book. And then, you know, I wanted my one Turtle book, my one Army of Darkness book, whatever it was. Didn't bother looking at anything else. If anyone else was like, oh, you should check this one out, I'd be like, nah, that's good. I'm looking for that one thing. Take off and leave. We start doing shows, and you're like, hey, have you seen this book before? No. Well, it's 10 cents. Okay, toss it in my pile. I'll try it. Like,
exactly. When you see these other forms of doing things and where to buy things.
So that just kind of reinforces the whole idea of everything we're going at with this show, though, too. You guys have stated again and again in different ways that if the price point is cheap enough, you will give it a try.
Right.
Oh, heck yeah.
So, basically, the paper quality doesn't matter anywhere near as much as the price on the cover. And if you guys are somewhere like Fred Meyer's or Safeway or a comic shop or wherever the fuck, and you see a comic and it looks interesting and it costs $1.99, it's not newsprint, you're going to be far more likely to give it a shot than if it costs $4.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I could agree with that.
You might actually pick it up for $1.99 and leave the store with it at $1.99.
Paper quality, I think, is just one of those things that it's just not a high priority for me. Like, I could care less what it's printed on as long as I enjoy it.
And granted, you're far more comfortable with a 50-cent price tag.
I don't think, I don't think a lot of people think about paper quality when they pick up their book, unless they're spending a lot of money on that book. If you're buying a big edition,
Right, yeah,
you want really good quality.
Yes.
But you buy a trade, maybe someone's using a different stock than another company. No one's going to think about that, really.
Right.
Your average person isn't going to.
You don't notice it unless there's a reason to notice it.
Yes.
Like with the glossy pages, the pages that are too glossy, you notice that because they're hard to read. They're reflecting every light source in the house.
Yeah.
Is that everything for tonight?
For now, I think so. But
Okay.
like you said, you can keep going.
Oh yeah, we could definitely keep going. But if we keep going, we're going to have a 4-hour conversation here.
This has got to be one of the longer conversations we've had. Even, we did spill off a little bit, but still.
Right? This is the longest one we've ever had without breaking into a 2-part series. But who knows? Maybe it will be. I guess the listeners will know once this is up. So, that's it for tonight. I'm Adam Watson.
Robert Diaz.
Levon Baker.
Thank you for listening.